The radio crackled twice and then went silent. That was the last thing Sergeant First Class Dominique Reyes heard before the building came down around her. Not an explosion exactly. More like the world folding inward, concrete and rebar and burning ceiling tile collapsing in a slow, terrible wave that swallowed everything. The fire came second. Orange light filling the spaces between the rubble. Heat pressing against her face like a hand. She was supposed to be dead. They left her there because they believed she was. That was their first mistake. The mission had been clean on paper. A 6-hour operation in the Cardin Valley, elevation 4,200 feet, temperature -8 Celsius after sundown. Sergeant Reyes and 5 members of Echo Company's designated marksman element were tasked with establishing overwatch on a suspected weapons transfer point. Intelligence had confirmed the location, the timing, and the vehicle identification. Everything checked out. What intelligence had missed was the second unit, the one that had been watching the Americans watch them. Dom had noticed something wrong 40 minutes before the ambush. She was the only one who did. She was positioned on the second floor of an abandoned grain processing facility, the best elevated sight line to the target valley below. Her M2010 enhanced sniper rifle was braced on a bipod fashioned from a piece of angle iron she'd found in the corner. The suppressor was warm. She'd already ranged every significant object within 1,400 meters, marked the distances in her field notebook in the cramped, precise shorthand she developed over 8 years. Then she noticed the dog. A single animal, brown and thin, was sitting at the edge of the village below. It was looking east, not toward the Americans, not toward the valley. East, perfectly still. Patient in the way animals went still when they sensed something that hadn't yet arrived. Dom clicked her radio. Sergeant Reyes to Echo 6. I'm seeing indicator behavior in the village. Something's moving east of us. Echo 6 was Lieutenant Connor Walsh. He was 26 years old, 7 months into his first deployment, and he was very confident. Not the kind of confident that came from experience. The other kind. Reyes, you're seeing a stray dog. Stay on your sector. She opened her mouth to press it, then stopped. She'd had this conversation before. Different names, different mountains, same response. The hierarchy had its gravity, and she had learned the exact cost of fighting it. She returned to her scope. 14 minutes later, they hit Echo Company from 3 directions simultaneously. The eastern attack came in RPGs first, 2 of them, one clipping the southeast corner of the grain facility and the second hitting the floor below Dom's position dead center. The concussion threw her off the bipod and into the far wall. She hit its shoulder first, felt something separate in her left arm, dropped to the floor, and grabbed her rifle by instinct before she even fully understood what had happened. Downstairs, the world was on fire. She could hear Walsh on the radio, the signal already breaking up as the jammer the attackers were running shredded their bandwidth. All elements, contact east and south, we are static. Dom moved to the window. Below, she could see the situation in the clear, brutal language of terrain and muzzle flashes. The eastern attack was the main effort. A force of at least 30 combatants was pushing from the tree line, using the burning vehicle wreckage from the RPG strike as a screen. The southern element was smaller, maybe 8 or 10, their job to cut off the retreat route. Echo Company's 5 remaining soldiers were pinned behind a low stone wall, badly exposed, already taking casualties. Walsh was down. She could see him from the window, moving but not standing. Someone had his collar, dragging him. Dom's finger found the trigger. She began shooting. 3 shots in 11 seconds. 3 fighters from the eastern element, who were the closest to the stone wall, went down. The advance stalled for 40 seconds, maybe 45, as the attackers tried to figure out where the fire was coming from. That was when the second RPG hit the grain facility. This one was aimed at her window. She heard it coming. That brief whisper of air. She dropped left behind a concrete column near the far wall, pressing flat, and the round went through the window and detonated against the back wall, where she had been standing 3 seconds before. The ceiling came down in slabs. The floor beneath her cracked and tilted. She scrambled for the door, and the floor gave way entirely, dropping her into the burning room below. She fell 12 feet and landed on something that absorbed most of it. She didn't know what. Her vision went white, then orange, then returned in pieces. Smoke. Heat. The sound of the fire eating the structure around her. Her rifle was still in her hands. She didn't know how. She heard voices outside. Not English. Close. She lay completely still in the rubble and the smoke and the heat. Her left arm was broken somewhere between the elbow and shoulder, a specific, clarifying pain that she filed away the way she filed everything now, as information rather than feeling. She controlled her breathing. Slow in, slow out. She had done this before in training, this particular stillness, but training didn't have smoke filling your lungs and broken concrete across your legs and a burning building deciding whether to fall on you or not. The voices moved closer. She heard the crunch of boots at what had been the entrance to the facility. Finished, one voice said. English, accented. Building is finished. No one came out. A second voice. The woman's sniper. Check. Footsteps inside now. She could see through a gap in the debris. A pair of boots moving through the smoke. Pausing. The figure was looking at the collapsed interior, at the fire, at the rubble that filled the space where someone might have fallen. She held every breath. Her heartbeat dropped the way it always did when she went still, a physiological mechanism so deeply trained it operated without her permission. 40 beats per minute. 38. She had been told by a cardiologist once that her resting heart rate in high-stress conditions was clinically abnormal. She had asked if that was a problem. He said it depended on the stress. The boots stopped moving. She's under there, the first voice said. No one survives that. The boots turned and walked away. She listened to them leave. Listened to the crunch of gravel receding. Listened to the distant sound of vehicles starting, of voices raised in the cadence of people consolidating after a successful operation, of people who believed they had won. She waited until she heard nothing but fire, and she began to move. It took her 40 minutes to free herself from the rubble. The concrete slab across her legs was the problem. She couldn't lift it with one arm. She spent 20 minutes finding leverage, a piece of rebar, a section of intact flooring she could use as a fulcrum. Her left arm was useless in the harness sense. She could still feel her fingers, which meant the break was not complete and the nerve wasn't severed. She set the arm against her body, used her jacket as a makeshift splint tied with a piece of wire she stripped from the wall. When she finally dragged herself free, she lay on the floor of the burning room for 90 seconds and did nothing but breathe. Then she took inventory. Rifle intact. 1 magazine remaining in the weapon, 17 rounds. 3 additional magazines in her vest, 60 rounds total. 77 rounds. Her sidearm. Her knife. Her field notebook. Her water, half a liter. No radio. It had shattered somewhere in the fall. No medical kit beyond the basic tourniquet and 2 pressure bandages she kept in her thigh pocket. Her left arm. 77 rounds and 1 functioning arm. She also had something she hadn't expected to survive. The rangefinder, which had been in her right vest pocket and was somehow uncracked. She checked it carefully. The display came on. Distance, wind speed angle, all functional. She checked her watch. 0347 hours. Dawn was 2 hours and 11 minutes away. She thought about Walsh and the others. Whether they were alive, whether anyone had called for support, whether the jammer was still running, and whether it mattered. She thought about the dog, sitting still, looking east. Then she stopped thinking and started moving. The grain facility had a basement level she hadn't known about. A coal cellar, half filled with old equipment, accessible through a collapsed section of floor. She found it by accident when the ground gave way beneath her, dropping her another 4 feet before she caught herself on a rusted rail. She used it. The cellar had a ventilation shaft that opened into an alley 40 meters from the facility. She moved through it on her stomach, pushing the rifle ahead of her with her good arm, her broken arm tucked tight against her chest. The pain was informational. She logged it and continued. The alley was clear. She took a moment in the darkness to orient herself. The facility was northeast of the target valley. The attack had come from the east. Standard doctrine for this kind of ambush meant the attackers would consolidate at a command position with good line of sight to the valley floor, monitor the approach routes for any QRF, and maintain a security perimeter until first light confirmed the area was clear. She knew how this worked because she had studied it. Not just the American doctrine. All of it. During her third deployment, she had spent 4 months studying the tactics of the specific regional groups operating in this theater, reading translated field manuals and after-action reports and intelligence summaries until she understood not just what they did but why. Until she understood how they thought. She knew where the command position would be. The ridge to the southeast. Elevation advantage, clear sight lines, natural defilade from the north and west. It was the same ridge she had ranged from the facility window before the attack, measured at 1,140 meters. She had noted it as a potential threat position and said nothing because Walsh had already dismissed her. She was going to it now. The walk took 43 minutes. She moved through terrain that most soldiers would not have attempted in daylight, down a gulch, across a frozen stream, up a loose shale slope in the dark. Her arms screamed on the shale section, every handhold against the rock a specific kind of agony. She did not stop. She had learned a long time ago that the only relevant question about pain was whether it was preventing her from functioning. As long as the answer was no, it was background. She reached the base of the ridge at 0451 hours, 62 minutes before sunrise. She found her position 8 minutes later. A natural depression behind a cluster of boulders at the ridge's eastern edge, offering a clear view of the valley and the village below. She ranged the enemy command position from here. It was where she expected it to be, a bombed-out agricultural building on the southern edge of the village, vehicles parked outside, a sentry visible at the northern corner. 1,080 meters. She settled into the depression, made the bipod from her rifle's integral system, and pressed her eye to the scope. She had 77 rounds. She made herself breathe. In through the nose for counts. Out through the mouth for counts. Her heart rate descended. The crosshairs steadied. She had 2 hours before full light. In full light, her position on the ridge would be visible to anyone scanning from the village. She needed to be finished before then, or she needed to be somewhere else. She began cataloging targets. What Dom saw through her scope in those pre-dawn hours was not chaos. It was organization. That was what made it dangerous, and that was what gave her the information she needed. The command element was inside the agricultural building. She could see figures moving behind the windows, the periodic light of a communications device, the shadow of someone studying what appeared to be a map or a screen. The sentry at the northern corner was rotating with a second guard every 40 minutes. She timed 3 rotations to confirm the interval. 2 vehicles were parked outside. A third was positioned 200 meters up the road as a blocking element. Engine running, 2 visible occupants. A 4th vehicle was concealed in a ravine to the east. She found it by the exhaust vapor rising in the cold air. 14 personnel visible. More inside. She estimated the total force at between 25 and 30. She also found something else. Walsh and 2 others. They were in a low outbuilding at the western edge of the village, a livestock pen of some kind, its walls too low for the 3 men to stand upright. She could see them through the scope, dim shapes in the cold. Moving. Alive. The math recalculated instantly. She had 3 American soldiers alive in that village. She had 77 rounds. She had 1 functioning arm. She had 2 hours before the light exposed her. She needed to do this right. She had been trained in the sequential elimination of command elements. The doctrine was simple. Remove the ability to direct, communicate, and coordinate, and unit fragments into individuals. Individuals were manageable. A coordinated unit was not. She found her first target at 0522 hours. A figure had emerged from the agricultural building and was standing at the entrance, speaking into a radio. Not a sentry. The posture, the deliberate gestures, the way other personnel deferred to him as he moved, this was leadership. This was the person whose voice held everything together. 1,120 meters. Wind from the northwest at 11 kilometers per hour, gusting to 16. Temperature -11 Celsius, affecting air density. Downslope angle of approximately 7 degrees. She ran the calculations the way her father had taught her to do arithmetic, automatically, without effort, the kind of fluency that came from doing something 10,000 times until it stopped being calculation and became intuition. He had been a civil engineer. He used to tell her that mathematics was just the language the world was already speaking, and all she had to do was learn to listen. She listened now. The crosshairs found the figure at the entrance. She exhaled half a breath, found the space between heartbeats. The crosshairs stabilized. The rifle fired. The figure at the entrance of the agricultural building stopped moving and did not move again. Dom cycled the bolt without looking away from scope. The spent casing ejected into the snow beside her. The sentry at the northern corner had not reacted yet. The wind had carried the sound away from the village, and at this range, the shot's origin was impossible to pinpoint without directional equipment. She had maybe 40 seconds before the body was discovered and positions changed. She used 30 of them. The radio operator who came out of the building to check on the fallen commander went down at 1,090 meters. He had made the mistake of coming out into the open, trying to raise his commander on the radio, standing still in the instinctive confusion of someone who does not yet understand what is happening. He understood it for approximately 1 second. Then the northern sentry realized something was wrong. He moved toward the corner of the building. Dom tracked him. She did not shoot yet. A dead sentry in the open would confirm the direction of fire. A sentry who went to cover and stayed there bought her time. He went to cover. She shifted to the blocking vehicle up the road. The engine was still running. She could see the exhaust vapor. She aimed at the engine block through the hood and fired twice. The vehicle lurched, stalled, the exhaust stopped. The two occupants dismounted immediately and moved to cover on opposite sides of the road, which is exactly what they were trained to do and exactly what she expected. The one on the left was exposed for 4 seconds as he rounded the vehicle's front end. She used 3 of them. Inside the village, she knew what was happening. She had been on the other end of this kind of engagement once, in her second deployment, a single shooter taking apart a convoy from a distance that made the shots feel like violence from outside the physical world. The psychological effect was specific and severe. When you cannot identify the shooter, when shots arrive without warning from a direction you cannot determine, the instinct is to get small, to stop moving, to put walls between yourself and the sky. That instinct was her ally. She worked the next 18 minutes methodically. The communications equipment was her third priority after leadership. She found the antenna array on the roof of the agricultural building, a collapsible tactical system, and put 2 rounds through its base. The equipment toppled. Radio silence. Personnel who moved in the open went down. Personnel who stayed behind cover she left alone. She was not trying to kill everyone. She was trying to make everyone unwilling to move, while removing the people whose movement directed others. At 0553 hours, she encountered her first real problem. 2 fighters had identified her approximate position on the ridge. Not precisely, the distance and the suppressor made exact triangulation impossible, but they had narrowed the origin to a 200-meter section of the eastern ridge, and they were moving to flank it. Both were moving with tactical discipline, bounding overwatch, using the terrain correctly. She had 8 minutes before the faster of the two reached a position that would put her in direct view. She had 51 rounds remaining. She moved, not far, 20 meters along the ridge, angling north, using the boulder field for cover. Moving with one arm, was an exercise in understanding exactly how much you relied on the arm you weren't using. Every movement required a different calculation, a different weight distribution. She knocked her broken arm against a rock face once, and the pain was extraordinary, and she kept moving because the alternative was 8 minutes of staying still and then being shot by someone she had not shot first. She found a new position, narrower than the first, less comfortable, better concealed. She ranged the two flankers from the new position. The first was at 340 meters and moving in a shallow gully, not yet aware she had moved. She waited until he paused to signal his companion before firing. He went down in the gully without a sound that would carry. The second flanker stopped. He had heard or sensed something wrong. He went to ground immediately, which was the right decision, and began scanning the ridge with a handheld optic. She watched him scan. He was looking at her old position. She waited 4 minutes while he stayed prone and still, scanning a stretch of ridge 20 meters from where she now lay. She controlled her breathing. Her arm had reached a level of pain that had stopped informing her of anything new and had simply become the temperature of the world. She breathed through it. The flanker finally moved. He was going back to the village, low and fast, having concluded that the shooter had relocated. She let him go. She needed someone to report to the village that the ridge was unpredictable, that the shooter had moved, that they did not know where to look. Fear of the unseen was a more effective weapon than bullets, used correctly. At 0611 hours, 12 minutes before first light, she turned her attention to the livestock pen. 3 personnel were guarding it. 1 at the door, 2 outside covering the approaches. Standard detail for a prisoner holding position, reasonable if they expected a QRF arrival from the north. She studied the situation for 7 minutes. The guard at the door was a problem. If she took him first, the other 2 would react, and she did not have a clean angle on both of them from her current position. If she took the exterior guards first, the door guard might go inside, and she had no way of knowing what instructions he had regarding the prisoners. She needed to do this differently. She ranged the old blocking vehicle at the road. It was 680 meters away, partially visible from the livestock pen. She put a single round through its windshield. The sound of breaking glass in a silent post-firefight environment travels. The 2 exterior guards both turned toward the road. She used the seconds of distraction. The closer exterior guard went down first. The farther one dove immediately, but she had already shifted her aim, and the second shot caught him as he moved. Neither sound was much. The suppressor earned its weight. The door guard had heard something. She could see him through her scope, looking toward the road, looking toward where his companions had been, not yet processing what had happened. He was on a radio that didn't work, keying it, getting nothing. He stepped away from the door, moved to check on the exterior guards. She waited until he was 5 meters from the door. The final shot for that sequence was at 790 meters. She cycled the bolt and watched the door. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Walsh appeared. He pushed the door open slowly, looked around, saw 3 guards down. He stood in the doorway for a full second longer than he should have, just looking at the valley and the road and the pre-dawn sky. She keyed the signal panel on her vest twice. The emergency IR beacon, visible on night vision equipment, which Walsh's team would have. Through her scope, she watched Walsh look directly at the ridge. He waved once, short and controlled. She did not wave back. She was already moving. What happened in the next 18 minutes became the part of the story that was told differently depending on who was telling it. The official account, compiled from after-action reports and the statements of the 4 surviving Echo Company members, described a designated marksman who had survived a structure collapse, established a long-range overwatch position, and systematically disrupted a superior enemy force sufficiently to allow 3 detained personnel to self-rescue and reach the extraction zone under cover of the marksman's continued suppressive fire. The numbers in the official account were precise. 11 enemy Kia confirmed. For probable, 6 personnel who withdrew and were not pursued, Total engagement time from first shot to extraction approximately 47 minutes. Distance of confirmed shots ranging from 340 meters to 1,140 meters. The account did not mention that Dom had done all of this with a broken arm, 77 rounds, no radio, and no support. It did not mention that Walsh had tried to order her to stop shooting 3 separate times once he had a working radio, and that she had acknowledged each transmission and continued shooting because she could see better than he could what still needed to be done. It did not mention the last shot. The last shot was at 0619 hours, 11 minutes after full light, when she should have already left the ridge. A vehicle she had not previously identified had emerged from the concealed position in the eastern ravine and was accelerating toward the extraction zone where Walsh and the 2 other survivors were moving. She ranged it at 940 meters. She had 9 rounds remaining. She was clearly visible on the ridge in full light, and anyone with glass could see her. The vehicle's occupants had glass. She shot the driver at 940 meters. The vehicle drifted into a ditch and stopped. She had 8 rounds remaining, and she used none of them because the engagement was over. The medevac arrived at 0714 hours. The arm was set at a field surgical facility and later pinned with 2 titanium screws. She was told she would have full range of motion in 4 to 6 months. She asked if she could still fire a rifle. The surgeon said probably yes, with physical therapy. She nodded and asked about discharge timing. Walsh came to see her before she was transferred. He sat in the chair beside her bed and did not say anything for a while. He was the kind of man who was more comfortable with action than language, and she had always understood that, even when it frustrated her. "I should have listened to you," he finally said. She looked at him. He had a bandaged shoulder, a split lip, 2 days of beard. He looked about 15 years older than he had before the mission. "The dog," he said. "The dog looking east." She didn't respond. "I've been thinking about that since they pulled us out of that pen." He shook his head. "You saw it. You told me. I dismissed it. If I hadn't, you'd have 3 more people alive right now," she said. Not harshly, just accurately. He accepted that. She watched him accept it, watched the weight of it settle onto him, and she did not try to take it back or soften it, because some weights were the correct weight for what they represented. "I'm putting you in for the Silver Star," he said. "I don't need a medal. I know you don't." He looked at her directly. "But I need to do it, because what you did was real, and it should be in the record. Not buried, not reduced. Real." She thought about that, about the records, about what usually happened to things that were inconvenient for the narrative, about her first deployment, when she had been quietly moved to a different position after outperforming a senior sergeant whose ego had been documented as a personnel concern. About her second deployment, when an after-action report had listed the critical shots from the convoy attack as originating from an unidentified friendly position. About the ways that the record could accommodate the facts without ever quite saying them. Will the record say what actually happened? She asked. "I'll make sure of it." She studied him. She had learned to read commanding officers the way she read terrain, looking for the stable ground and the soft spots, the places where you could put weight and the places where you'd sink. Walsh was telling the truth. She had decided that in the livestock pen, when she watched him stand in the doorway and look at the ridge and know immediately what he was looking at. There was a particular quality to the recognition on someone's face when they understood what had saved them. It was different from gratitude. It was something closer to reckoning. "Then put in the record," she said. 3 weeks later, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and institutional coffee, Dom received a visit from a woman she had not met before. Colonel Adrian Cole, Special Operations Command, who had the practiced stillness of someone who had spent a long time in rooms where the wrong word could change the outcome of things. Cole set a folder on the table between them without opening it. "I'm going to be direct," Cole said. "We've been reviewing the after-action reports from the Cardin Valley operation. Not just the official summary, the full record." Dom waited. "What you did out there," Cole said, "is not something we encounter often. The sustained engagement, the target sequencing, The range and conditions, the operational improvisation. She paused. And you did it alone, with a broken arm. After being left for dead. Someone made a decision to leave, Dom said. I made a different decision. Yes. Cole studied her. I'm here because we're building something. A small unit, deep specialized, the kind of work that doesn't appear in press releases. We need people who can function alone in denied environments. Who can read a situation faster than the situation can change. Who can make the right decision when there's no one left to ask. She placed her hand flat on the closed folder. We've been looking for someone with your particular skill set for 11 months. Dom looked at the folder. What's the work? She asked. The kind that matters, Cole said. The kind where if you do it right, the people who sent you home come home. The room was quiet. Through the window, the sun was coming up over the mountains, painting the snow on the peaks in shades of amber and rose. Dom thought about the grain facility, about the darkness of the coal cellar, the cold of the ventilation shaft, about the 43-minute walk up the shale ridge with a broken arm and 77 rounds, and the certainty, not optimism, but certainty, that what needed to be done could be done if she was the one doing it. She thought about the dog, sitting still, looking east. She thought about what it meant to be left for dead and to rise anyway. Not out of anger, not out of need to prove something, but because the mission wasn't finished and she was the only one left who could finish it. When do I start? She said. Cole opened the folder. 6 months later, a training facility in an undisclosed location received a new instructor for its advanced marksmanship program. The intake paperwork listed her specialty as long-range precision engagement in adverse conditions. It did not mention the titanium pins in her arm. It did not mention the Carden Valley. On her first day, she walked into a room of 12 students, all of them experienced, all of them skeptical in the quiet way that soldiers were skeptical of things that hadn't yet proven themselves to them. She set her rifle case on the table. She opened it. Nobody laughed. They had done their reading. Long-range precision work isn't about the shot, she said. It's about the decision before the shot. The patience before the decision. The reading of everything that makes the decision necessary. She looked around the room. I'm going to teach you how to see what's already there before anyone tells you to look. One student, young, perhaps 23, raised his hand. What's the most important thing you can teach us? She thought about the dog, about the way it had sat perfectly still and looked at something that hadn't arrived yet. Pay attention to what the world is trying to tell you, she said, before the noise starts, in the quiet. That's when the information is cleanest. She picked up her rifle. Everything else, she said, is just math. And she began.